as I said, Lumina Foundation came out with research in 2021. And I'm just reviewing the research there, is that 64% of students participated in a high impact practice during the first academic term. A higher percentage of Black and Hispanic or Latino students participated. That's great news, because sometimes access to these kinds of experiences, there's an access gap. Just like we talk about achievement gaps, there's an access gap. And so this was really exciting to know that all students are getting an opportunity to participate in a practice that really impacts student success. I find this aspirational for me. I'm hoping that we can look at Pikes Peak Community College data and see the same kinds of examples of participation. And then the retention increased by 22% for adult students, and that's that 25 and older age group. 22% for Black students and 8% for Latino students participating in high impact practices. And that's the comparative data where you have two student sets, one that participated in high impact practice and one that did not. And they're very similar makeup in the two student sets. But for today, I thought was super exciting is that Hispanic students appear to derive large and consistent benefits across outcomes from their participation in service learning. So if this is true, then I think it gives us not a mandate, but certainly a direction for which high impact practice to adopt and when to adopt it. So can you think about areas, I see a hand raised, in your college where we could implement a high impact practice in that first year of the student experience? And yes, go ahead and ask your question.
I was just wondering if the higher percentage, your second bullet point, does that previous chart that you had up comparing, Latinx with modern, is there some explanation, or from that, this is encouraging, but it's also could be predicted, or it actually makes sense?
Yeah, it's very hard to say that we've had some questions around, aren't the people who are adopting high impact practices just the best faculty anyway? And we really just can't go on that. It's one of those theoretical questions that we don't have an answer to. All we can really look at is the data, making sure that the data is valid, and that's pretty much it. So in terms of it being predictive, maybe. I would say, just from my experiences with Hispanic communities, that there is oftentimes a value of service and of collaboration. And I've seen that in the service learning courses that I teach. And I will also say for community college students, and this is true of all of my community college students, they're often sort of awoken to the fact that they're able to contribute to their community, that the values in their community matter, and that that's valued in the classroom, and that they get to do something out in the community to really celebrate that and to cement that in their values. Anybody else on that one?
So yeah, I think that what he was asking, I think that second bullet point reaffirms the previous little chart thing that we were discussing. It just reaffirms some of that. If the data is, I guess you could run a correlation on the data to see, but it's certainly, if you have these practices in place, I think that the data supports the use, this data at least, the Lumina data, supports the previous engagements that we just had with that chart. It supports that.
Yeah.
But it also supports the idea that many Latinos have, that you are what you bring to the table is valuable.
Yeah.
And so it reaffirms that. It sort of gives them a space for Latino students, that it reaffirms that sometimes it's forgotten, for not just for Latino students, minority students in general.
Thank you, Elsa. Yeah, I always worry about using data and looking at something that's unrelated and saying that it, but I appreciate, because Elsa is a true social scientist, so I will go with her direction on that.
You're very kind. You're very kind.
And Robin, I would throw one little thing. If you want to, we did at the beginning of our implementation of service learning at Pikes Peak, did a comparative study where we had the same faculty member teaching the same class. So they had 2 sections or more, but one service learning, one was not service learning, but the same faculty member, and did comparative of success rates, retention and all of that with the same faculty member. And we saw great, gains for students in kind of all categories in that small study. And you may ask yourself, well, did that comparative study over 2 semesters continue? And the answer is no, because people had such success using service learning that they chose not to teach without service learning in those classes. So we lost the comparative, the non. So
it was actually 2.5 years, Joellen. Yeah. Yeah.
We've done so many studies, I lose track. So I apologize.
And I do recall from that one that I believe the Hispanic students in that study were 5% more likely to pass their class than without it. Hi, Shelley, I see your hand.
Hi, sorry, my mute button got caught. I have a couple questions about this actually. In my former life, I was an applied learning coordinator. And so my first question for you is there a reason we're using service learning instead of applied learning in our I'm a semantics person, y'all. And so I want to know the difference and why we're sticking with service learning, because applied learning is such more of a umbrella term. And my second part of that question is, are these projects set up ahead of time, or do the students have a voice in who they're serving? So those are my questions.
That's good questions. Okay. So the first one is that all high impact practices are applied learning. And so service learning just nuances that to be a community-based project. And especially with that benefit to the community piece. The beauty of that, I think you're immediately going to see, which is the students need to research and understand their community before they can develop a project that would be of benefit in partnership with that community. The second question we get asked a lot, and it's everything under the sun. Really, it can be a group project, it can be individual projects, it can be that the teacher has organized the entire thing, it could be that it's very open-ended. My particular service learning project is incredibly open-ended, and I do that because I want the students to choose from their own experiences and values and identities and cultures what they want to write about and research. And so, yeah, it can be any of the above.
I think it can also, Shelley, just a little something to think about. Certain disciplines might be more constraining because of what they have to do, or the course would be more constraining because of what we have to cover, because of the common course stuff, the topics and whatever that stuff is at the state level. So those things need to be taken into consideration. And as you are developing a service learning or any HIPS project that you really want to do, you need to, one of the things that it's important is also to make sure that it's important for that course, so that the students are applying content to that service learning. everything. So it's not just like we're going to do the service learning, but it has nothing to do with what I'm teaching.
Right.
And here is where I think that the minority students in general can actually see sort of where sometimes it's hard because of preparation or because they have never seen themselves in high school in certain places, or they have never been able to look at that identity and explore that. And this gives them an opportunity to do that in a contextualized and intentional way as they are doing this.
Absolutely.
And I would say too, I think one thing about with HIPS is oftentimes Joellen and Robin and the team create rubrics, right? And so that we could have this rubric that is specific to a broad range of project opportunities. Another piece is like in my class, because they have to do a certain number of social service hours. One of the things that I do have prescribed projects, but if they can come to me and create an argument for a better project and a team of them want to do it, then at the end of the day, I just care about meeting the learning outcomes. So I think the prescribed projects give people kind of something to think about and a way for students to think about it, and then leaving an opportunity for them to propose a different project. I have found that to be extremely successful.
Thank you. The only other thing I want to throw out here, just because it was something that came up a lot when we first implemented the applied learning program at my previous school, is that sometimes the project falls through, right? Like you do the work, you do the effort, and then something happens and it just can't be completed. And that's okay, because learning is still happening. And that's why we have the reflection piece that's always tied to those applied learning projects. So I kind of think of like the Babe Ruth quote, like, don't let the fear of striking out keep you from stepping up to bat. A lot of people, when they're first learning about applied learning, are hesitant because they want it to be this perfect project, but we all know perfection is not achievable. And so I would say that some of the best learning experiences my students have come from the projects that fell through, because that's how life works. Like sometimes you're going to do all the work, you're going to go pitch to a company and they're going to choose somebody else instead. It doesn't mean what you did wasn't valid.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, this is so true. And I wish we were doing this all on service learning, because I have so much more to say, but I'm going to move on from that. I did put in the chat where you can find some ideas and resources on service learning. So we have a website that's ppcc.edu/HIPS. From that, you can find a service learning page, ways to serve, and then you can also go to the HIPS guide, which has even more material and information. And if maybe we want to do something together, CCA and PPCC, around service learning and Latinx students, I'd say that would be a wonderful future endeavor. Well, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about how high impact practices are culturally relevant. Oh my goodness. And I wonder if I can get rid of that thing. No. Okay. So the top of my screen is covered, but this was actually put together by our dear colleague, Rain Coke Clark, who is our Diversity Global Learning Lead. And we were just trying to think about what's already in high impact practices that are culturally relevant pieces. And so Joelle, I'm going to ask you to just read that first one off for me because I can't see it.
I can see them. Do you want me? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, girl.
You go.
Oh, from what I'm seeing, it's assignment/project relevant to the course material and course CLOs.
Okay.
Do you want me to read all of them or just
That's
one?
great. No, we can stop
Okay.
at that one. That was the one that I couldn't see. But and so what high impact practices do is they actually ask the faculty member to design a project around course outcomes. And this intentionality and transparency in design will actually help our Latinx students to understand the course material and the course learning outcomes better. So it's just a design principle. It benefits all students, but in particular, those who are underrepresented in student success measures. Another one is it's a student-centered approach. It will, that we really focus on empowering students, giving them agency, choice, to make the assignment more relevant to their culture. There's interaction about process, and that's just in general. And more interaction about process is really great for community college students. Also, there's the interaction with diverse groups of students that builds community. There's the aspects of Yoso's community of cultural wealth, excuse me. And that's the idea that whatever culture you are from, you bring assets to the group from that culture. And so we can be transparent again about that in our interactions with diverse groups of students, and even in the project, the problem-solving nature of a project, for example. And then lastly, sharing the project outside of the classroom can give great benefit, not only to the student, but that sense of connection back to others in the community. And it was interesting, I was just on another call recently, and they brought up the idea of families being aware of high impact practices. And we've seen that a lot, especially service learning, where the family's so proud of what the student has accomplished. And when you make it public, they get to participate in that and share in that. And that's a very communal aspect culturally that you get through high impact practices. Even introverts enjoy their support systems and their families being able to see what they've done. Then we took it a little further, and we looked at an article called Centering Racially Minoritized Voices in the Classroom. And it's actually more of a survey study of diverse students who've gone through some high impact practice classes, experiences. And these are the results of the study. They had some areas for improvement. And I think that's what I'd like to look at, is that high impact practices are not perfect. There's always that room for improvement. And so there was, across the board, probably, I think it was 59% or more had transformative, beneficial experiences. And so there was a lot of praise for the high impact practice experience, but then there were some concerns as well around the quality of the implementation, around participation gaps. And this can come into play also in four-year colleges where it's more competitive, not necessarily embedded into the course. And then dominant perspectives. If the teacher or the rest of the students are really constantly only in one cultural perspective, and the educator has not brought in or given room or space for other cultural perspectives. And so they rated their HIPS experience, as I said, favorably. And here's what they identified: differences in experiences with time and effort, interactions with faculty and peers, and experiences with diversity. Those were a little more negative for the student group that was surveyed. Perhaps the time and effort was a challenge to put in if the student was juggling family, work, et cetera, et cetera. Perhaps the interactions with faculty and peers were not as culturally sensitive or culturally inclusive as they should have been. And then experiences with diversity could probably be in that same category. But here's what I'm excited about. So I guess what I should say, not but, is we can improve those areas. And in fact, this issue of time, we've given quite a bit of conversation to this. How do we engage our students in high impact practices without requiring some major extra project? And there are a lot of ways we can do this. If we have time, we can talk about. I guess I'm very excited about the revealed new dimensions. So making a difference for others is what came out of these conversations with racially minoritized students, is that was actually one of the most important things, one of the most motivating things, one of the things they felt they learned from the most. So agency, I'm not surprised by that, because I've been beating that drum for a long time, is if we are adult learners, we need to be able to make choices. We need to be able to take responsibility. But the educator, the designer of the learning experience, needs to open that table up to the students. And if we don't do that, if we don't bring in the student experience, the student voice, the student sort of self-determination, then we're missing something there. So I was really glad to see that appear. So those are two areas where we can improve as well. So this slide's all about improvement of high impact practices. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
I did put the link to the article for those of you who maybe were not part of the High Impact Practices workshop. Additionally, if you have interest in getting into that workshop and seeing what was in there, feel free to send us an email and let us know. If you just give us your S number, I think we can probably get you in there to see some of these things in more detail.
Thank you, Joellen. And Carmen, just so you know, I created a kind of a sandbox shell. So if you have people that are just curious and want to go in and see what's in there, just let us know and we'll make sure they get added to that.
I'd like to sort of look at this issue of improvements, and heavens knows that you guys know that I am a great skeptic in so many ways, but I think that one of the things that we need to be quite aware is what needs improvement is also the back side of that is a measurement of our own expectations and management of student expectations. And so sometimes it's our own it's our expectations or the student expectations that we really need to do. And sometimes you have students that, I mean, I've had a failed project before. And I've had a failed project before. Anyway, it was not 100% failed, but it was definitely not what my expectation was. And I had to say, you know, did everyone benefit at some ways? And the students were quite honest that their expectations were also much higher. So we had to come out and say, well, did you guys learn anything? You know, is this anything worth it, you know?
Anything.
So, well, we had to go do the autopsy, right, of this and come out. And I think that's very important to do.
Even that process is incredibly important.
Yeah. So reflecting on that is something. And I think that the participation gap sometimes could be something that's very much associated, as well as the implementation of this with expectations. And when it comes to dominant perspective, sometimes we tend, instead of working from the dominant perspective, if you teach and you implement from the margins in, and you do that reverse approach and see work from the margins into mainstream of what this could be, you'll be surprised how successful these things could actually be.
Well, that's a great observation. Thank you. So I did want to mention a couple of the elements of high impact practices and how these can work to benefit our Latinx students. And so metacognition is a really great one. It's one of the 8 elements of high impact practices. Students can connect with prior learning or life experiences through metacognition. So it's just critical awareness of one's thinking and learning, oneself as a thinker and learner. And so students think about what how, and why they learn. These are really simple adjustments also to make to maybe a project you're already doing. So it's really simply asking a student, what did you learn today? That can be a content question, or it could be, was there an attitude that shifted? It could be, what was your process in preparing for that exam, or preparing to interview that community member? And then the why is always ultra important for all community college students, because oftentimes they're not connecting the particular class either to their lives outside of college or to their future career goals. And so we can ask questions along those lines as well, and have conversations along those lines as well. So we can use reflection in our courses to make meaningful connections. Students make cultural and identity affirming choices in their projects, and there's a bunch of ideas here again. Assignments with options give the students autonomy to make the assignments culturally relevant. Even if you are a faculty member that likes to maybe choose a community partner or design part of the assignment ahead of time, choose 3 options that will work with your curriculum, that will work with your timetable, but then allow students maybe even to make adjustments within that. Maybe there's something they start seeing that you don't see. Hi, Shelley. Yes, go.
Yeah, I always have a lot of questions. I love that you are talking about community partners here, and this is actually something that has recently come up in a few conversations. And if you're not able to answer this, that's fine. But do we have any, and do we know where I can find the list? As far as I know, everyone I've talked to doesn't know where the answer to this is. So is there a process that we're aware of?
I think, isn't there a Carmen? Carmen, is that a question for you or something you could find out at CCA?
I can probably find out. Shelley, if you could shoot me an email to follow up on that, and I'll do some digging and see what I can find.
Thanks, Carmen, because I've been I tried to look for myself for the alumni person who would have our alumni partners or a community partner page, and I am coming up with nothing so far. So I will shoot you an email. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
At Pikes Peak, we had a similar challenge when we started to kind of fully get a lot of folks on board for community projects and things. And so Robin and I started collecting the organizations that were willing and excited to have Pikes Peak students as part of their work. And so we have a ways to serve and then partnership listed. And so it's not just Boys and Girls Club, the regular website, but instead it has a contact person. And so that can really help. And that may be something that if you don't have that, it can build by just surveying other faculty. Hey, has anybody done any projects out in the community? Was it a positive impact? Could you share the contact, And so maybe that's where it starts to build. But great question. And it saves everybody a lot of running around individually when that group, they don't want us, they are hungry for interaction. So great question.
I actually have a follow-up question on that one too, because the part of the reason I ask honestly is back when we had done this at the other school, we were letting the students go out and engage with the community partners on their own. And what we found is that there needs to be some very important coaching before that happens. And it did go poorly, and we ended up having to implement a specific process. This is how you reach out to a partner. This is how you document this. There was an actual contract with the partners as to what they would get and what we got out of it. So I'm curious if that's something that you all are doing, or if it's more instructor by instructor decides how they're working it out.
So we do have a handbook, and it provides some of those guidelines. But it is very much instructor by instructor. We really trust our faculty to make either make good decisions or fix bad ones. And so, but we do, student choice is actually incredibly important in all of the things didn't go well scenario, because then they have selected as opposed to us selecting. So yeah, there's a lot to be said on that I probably can't get into right now, but
well,
yeah.
and I'm just kind of curious legality wise, like if there are forms we have to have on contracts through the community college system here in order to
walk down this road, and we can certainly talk with you about it more. And if you go look at our handbook, you'll see all
the info. Okay, I will look there before I ask more questions. And thank you.
No, I like the questions. They're really, really good ones. So I wanted to go back to this, that the autonomy, the agency is important. When given the choice, students often choose projects that typically reflect individuals who look like them. Once a student stated, I got to interact with members of my own community. Another appreciated being able to be surrounded by individuals who look just like me. So we can, as students will rethink how they learn and why they value their education. With these kinds of interaction, they become involved in their communities. They become active rather than passive learners. They help identify and solve problems in their communities, build closer connections between their campus and their communities, learn about our increasingly varied and changing world. That's very canned language right there. Understand people and cultures that are unique, and develop resourcefulness, a stronger inner self, and a clearer sense of personality, a personal identity. So I want to share one of my projects that I do that really facilitates something like this. It's so I teach writing. It's individual projects. I just ask students to think about something that really makes them mad, or something they think is really important in their local community. And so an issue that bothers them, or an issue that they really want to carry a banner for that's important. And that's where I start them. So it's scaffolded. At the same time I do that, I actually ask them to introduce themselves. And again, Rain Clark helped me with this of introduce yourself, tell us something about your culture, your identity, your career path, your community, and so on. And so they've just done that. So it's racing through their heads. And then they come up with an issue that bugs them, or that they think is really important. And then that's the direction they go. They end up needing to find an organization or a person in the local community that has the power to affect change around this issue. And they write an argument, a proposal in my class to that person or organization, and they send it. So they're using their writing with a real audience for a real purpose, and designing their writing to accomplish something real in their community. And it's kind of beautiful because the class really bonds with each other about, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. And I actually have them do an interview. So they have to call or email the person or the organization to get more information. They have to do research about the community that they're making a proposal to. And some of these things are genuinely different for them, skill-wise or experience-wise. But when they start getting their answers back from these organizations, it's amazing. And they share with each other a lot of this about their own communities, their own passions, the things that they're hearing and feeling. And it's just really, at least that particular project has been really beneficial. So, all right, I think we're getting close, aren't we? We are 1 minute away. All right, let's see what else I've got here. Just an emphasis on listening and understanding and involving others. So peer reviews can be a part of that. Even ourselves as educators to emphasize listening, ask questions to understand, while being conscious about making sure everybody's included in discussions. And that is it. Look at me. All right. Well, thank you for hanging in there, afternoon session. And this is such an important issue. that we would love to keep the conversation going. So please do feel free to reach out to any of us, and just looking forward to seeing what both of our colleges do in the future.